I did not pull up.
Are you in the call?
So we are at this time going live. So we should see it hopefully in the news stream.
It just showed up on my screen.
It just showed up. Hey, and here it goes on mine. So, hey everyone, and welcome to the STEM Lab podcast, Women in STEM Celebration. We are so happy to have women who I began the STEM journey with over 30 years ago. In 1991, we entered the Alabama School of Math and Science in Mobile, Alabama. And from there, we all took off to our various places in STEM. And so I thought it was a very important time for us to have a conversation just about how that STEM journey has gone. Again, we've been in it for 30 years. And so when you've been in it for so long, it definitely has to be some challenges and some successes that has come about. And so I thought, who better to talk about this with than all these lovely women that you see here on camera with me, who again joined me a long time ago before STEM was acronym. And so, as you all know, I am your host of the STEM Lab podcast, Sabrina Walthall, and I will let my panelists start introducing themselves, and then we'll get into the conversation. So, I'll hand it over to my co-host, Ruth Mcmullen. I was about to call her Rocker because that's what I knew her as in high school. And just to say, my moderator for the chat room is Tamika Powell. And so, any information that you share with us in the chat, she will share with us here on the panel. So, Ruth, I'll give it over to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having all of us. It's so good to see so many old friends. I don't want to say old, but so many friends from
Sure.
1991. Gosh, remember we were babies walking onto that campus just as lost as we could be. So I'm Ruth Mcmullen. I did go to the Alabama School of Math and Science with all of these fantastic women. I did not go into STEM. I started in STEM and biomedical science. I realized I wasn't very good at that and wasn't very interested in it. I ended up with a bachelor's degree in psychology and criminal justice with a concentration in forensics investigations. There were no separate forensic science degrees 30 years ago when I went to college. So that's the best we could do. And I ended up being a lawyer, which is something I actually predicted I was going to do when I was at ASMS. And I'm sure, some of you remember that story with me getting kicked out of genetics class. We'll talk about that later. Why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll go around with the rest of the panelists.
I missed that, Ruth. Was that for me?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Tamika Powell. Also, are we all 1993? I think we're all the class of 1993.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yes, that's what you did. So I also did not initially go into a STEM career out of high school. My experience at ASMS kind of moved me in the other direction. But after several years and career changes, I have kind of circled back around to a STEM career field, which I've been in now for 9 years, going on 10. So I feel like I have returned to my roots. And so I am very excited to listen to these ladies talk about their careers in STEM as well, what's been going on for the last many, many years.
Julie, why don't you introduce yourself? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Thanks, Ruth. Julie Stone, and I was one of the ones that went directly into STEM, actually from ASMS right into college. I did do some research at ASMS, and when I was in college, I went for undergraduate work. I did medical research in a pharmacology lab. Switched around, did some work for a civil engineering company, and now I'm doing programming. Back to you, Ruth.
I can't hear. I couldn't hear you, Ruth, but I think I read your lips. Okay. Yeah,
You are always a good lip reader. Yes.
yeah. I'm like, that's okay. I'm April Perkins, and I also went into STEM straight from ASMS. I went to Auburn and majored in chemical engineering, and I've been working in STEM for 22 years.
Wow. Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Lewis, and I left ASMS and I went in a different direction. I majored in history and secondary education, and then I got a master's in history and a master's in educational leadership, and then I got a specialist in instructional technology. So I've been a classroom teacher for about 25 years now.
Thank you. Next on my screen is Leslie.
I think I heard you call on me.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I left ASMS, I went to a university in South Carolina called Winthrop University, and like many of us, I think, started out I was pre-med, and that lasted about a year and a half, and I realized that just wasn't for me, and went completely in the other direction and majored in English literature, if you can believe that, and did wind up getting a bachelor's degree in English literature. However, toward the end of my junior year, I took an economics class simply because I needed a social science course in order to graduate, and fell in love with it and sort of regained my passion for math and data and technology, etc. And so from there, I then went on to graduate school in economics, and later did another graduate degree in mathematics. And since then, have had an amazing career in STEM, over the past 20 some odd years, and it's a great joy for me. Used all of the skills that I've been accumulating all this time in economics, data science, or what's now called data science, right? Again, 30 years ago, data science wasn't a thing, but it is now. And also I'm a full stack software developer, and all of those things taken together have allowed me to recently found a technology startup called Mentor. And so that's sort of my new journey, but it's all thanks to the skills and the knowledge I've accumulated thanks to this incredible career in STEM.
Holly.
Hi, I'm Holly Denham, and right out of ASMS, I went to Davidson College, and I wandered around for several years, and then wound up walking through the biology halls one day, and it smelled like home, which is weird, I know, but so I decided to take more biology courses and declared my major in biology. But I got out of Davidson pretty burned out, so I just worked in a lab, which I did not enjoy at all. And I finally wound up going into environmental education. So I have been in environmental education for over 20 years. I have a graduate degree from Montreat College in environmental education. And it's sort of a marriage between education and environmental science, and allows people to kind of directly connect to nature in a way, how they interact with nature on a daily basis. Not just nature, but the natural world, I guess, is a better way. I can't hear anybody.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm Hang Nguyen, and I graduated and went to Auburn. Like Leslie, I was in pre-med, and then I finished at University of South Alabama in respiratory, then cross-trained over to cardiopulmonary. And I was in that field for about 6 years. And then after I had my first daughter, I kind of pretty much retired. And then now I'm in catering. So we own our own business, and that's what I'm doing. And so my career in STEM is very short.
We're going to get back to that catering shortly. Yeah. So I guess one of the things I wanted to talk about was several of you mentioned that you either left ASMS burned out on STEM or you quickly got burned out while you were in college. So was there any particular factor that anyone recalls that, you know, this was a tipping point, I'm done with this field?
I mean, I'll go. I think when I left the Alabama School of Math and Science, I think there's two answers to the question. The first thing is I always tell people that the Alabama School of Math and Science was a liberal arts high school with a math science focus. And the reality was that we had fabulous professors across the board. And so we all love the Whites. Dr. Mr. White gave me a love for history that I knew if I was going to spend time reading and doing things in college, I wanted to read history. And being a teacher was the way I could major in history and get a job. So Dr. White is really what led me to history. But the other thing is, if I'm being honest, is I think that when I was in high school and really all school, I always did really well. And the Alabama School of Math, first time I had ever struggled with anything. And so at that point, I don't think I understood the things I teach my students now about like growth mindset. And I got a little discouraged, if I'm being honest. I didn't feel as smart as I thought I was. And so I think that's part of why I decided to shift gears a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think ASMS was a humbling experience for a lot of us. What about once you got to college? You know, Leslie and Hank, you said you started in pre-med and quickly changed your mind. So what was it?
I think it was really intense for me with pre-med, and then the long years of school, and then with family, I switched over to respiratory, and then it still helped me to stay in a healthcare field and still do what I want and care for people, but also was less on time. And you know how to say we burn out from ASMS. ASMS was intense because I remember Dr. Quadio was my chemistry teacher. He was also my guidance, like my counselor. He ended up signing me up for 5 years of organic chemistry. So it was a lot of like science and chemistry. So when I got to college, I was kind of like, when am I ready to work? Want to get out there? So I just wanted to work and get out there, and I did, and I enjoyed my time. It's just that family led me to being home.
Yeah, and I think for me, ASMS was still early days, and I think that they were trying to figure out how to guide each of us into what we were going to do next. And so I didn't have that much guidance, to be honest, and I'm sure it's completely different now. But everyone was so focused on the school doing well and all of us getting scholarships to college, which which absolutely changed my life. But there wasn't a lot of support around exactly what are all the different kind of career fields maybe that we would want to pursue, or college majors, or at least I personally didn't find that to be the case. And so I thought, well, let me go pre-med, because that's something that is a good thing to major in. It would be great to be a physician and that kind of thing. And when I realized that actually, after a year and a half of all of the science, that the science wasn't the thing that really excited me, I sort of didn't quite know where else to go. Because while we did a lot of math at ASMS, no one really talked to me about the ability as a woman to excel in math after you left, or in other types of math related disciplines. And so I was a little bit lost when I realized that science really wasn't for me in terms of pre-med. And similar to Stephanie, I had a wonderful professor at ASMS, Dr. Goodman, for English Lit, and I loved it so much. And so I thought, well, I really enjoy it. Let me do that and see if this is what is actually my passion, or if something else presents itself. And, you know, lucky for me that something else did present itself, and that was economics, which then set me back on the path toward, in terms of, you know, STEM, not S for science, but, you know, technology and economics and mathematics. And as I said before, it's been a tremendous journey.
I also think that
to you.
I also think, you know, I also was pre-med when I started college, and realized that doctors were just the most educated people that I knew in my rural town. And so I didn't know that there were other science things that I could do outside of either being a professor or being a doctor. We were still very new to it all. And what I really found is that I really just hate all cellular biology. I just really hate it. And I also hate all forms of chemistry, all of them. But I really, really loved ecology and environmental science, and I like systems thinking. So I only want to know enough chemistry to help me understand what it is that I'm looking at right now. And it took me a long time to figure out that just because I don't happen to, that shift from being a doctor, it took me a long time to kind of find my place, because I didn't want to spend all my time in a lab, or ever in a lab if possible. But I did finally find a place that kind of married my love of teaching with my love for ecology.
That's so interesting. April, you went into chemistry, right? And then chemical engineering.
Well, yeah, I was going to mention, I was also originally started out as pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor, but when I got to Auburn, they had chemical engineering program with the pre-med option. So meaning I a chemical engineering degree, but I will also have all my undergrad classes to support taking the MCAT and passing successfully. So I did that program up until my senior year, actually. And I realized then that I was kind of burnt out on school and did not want to go directly into med school. So yeah, and it worked out because I had my chemistry degree as well. And that was kind of the plan initially too, because I was like, you go pre-med, what if you change your mind? And then you have either chemistry or a biology degree that would kind of push you into teaching. And I never really saw myself as an educator. So I went with that pre-med, the engineering degree with the pre-med option, and but ultimately chose to just do engineering, which I regret now, but that was not the point.
Yeah, we're going to put a flag on that one and we'll come back. Julie, so you also went right into science or STEM and stayed with it. So did you not get burned out? Did you get burned out and came back? How did you?
Yes, yeah, and I think it's kind of a common thread that I'm hearing, and part of it that I think is we as talented women were so pushed to go into college right away that we really didn't know exactly what path that we wanted, and that caused a lot of issues in our own our own psyche and our personal lives as we were trying to figure out what exactly we wanted. I was pushed kind of into the biomedical sciences because my parents wanted a doctor, because they thought, oh, you're the smartest kid in our family we know. Obviously, you're going to be a doctor. But as I was getting into the courses, it just really wasn't for me. But I did have a talent for doing laboratory work, and I was like, okay, well, I could do the technical laboratory side. Part of that, and so I did have 2 different positions when I left, or when I graduated. One was doing DNA profiling of convicted felons for a private lab, and then the other was doing medical research at the university with the same professor I had in my undergraduate work. And both of those were somewhat negative experiences that just completely turned me off of doing the medical side of the field. And with that, I did take a bit of a break, and I actually went to do substitute teaching to kind of recenter myself and figure out what exactly did I really want to do. And that's where I ended up getting my second degree in computer science, so that I could do something that I really enjoyed and use part of my creativity that I really liked.
That makes perfect sense. And I think, one of the things I want to ask you all about, and, I want you to talk about, is for our viewers who are in college or contemplating going to grad school, Holly mentioned that there wasn't a lot of guidance, and April said it too. Knowing what degrees to major in, where the humps are, where you can get caught up is a huge issue, combined with the pressure to go straight to college and hurry up and get out and help your family. So I know that I started and I put myself a semester behind right away because I picked a nursing major. And once I got in, I realized that as a nursing major, my core classes don't count towards another degree and another major if I were to change my major. So, and so what are some things when you started college that, you wish you had known, you would have done differently in terms of picking a major or changing your major to save people time? Because there is that crush to hurry up and get out, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just wish that someone had talked to me about all of the different possibilities. As I said before, when I left, ASMS, I was trying to figure out myself what to do that was still sort of to do ASMS proud. Well, as many of you have said, go pre-med, because that's a great thing to do. And for women who are graduating high school or even early in college, my advice would be to seek out other women who are doing a variety of things. Talk to someone who has done something in a field that you're really interested, but also in a field that you're kind of interested in. Because I can also say, and I think this is probably the case for many of you, economics is not usually taught as a subject even in high school. And so I had not yet been introduced to it until, again, the end of my junior year in undergraduate. And I wish that I had known about it, going into undergrad, because it's a beautiful melding of, communication and math and strategy and all of these things that would have probably very much appealed to me. And so I would just say, reach out to other women that someone in your family knows, who have done really interesting things. Spend an hour with them, ask them all sorts of questions, and you'd be surprised at how willing they are to give of their time and to help you understand what's out there for you and what's possible for you as a woman in STEM.
And Ruth, one of the things I wanted to also mention, because we're talking about, and you said undergrad and graduate. So graduate school for me came about because after graduating with my biology degree, like everybody else, I was pre-med, but at that time it was just too much. And most of you, and especially even in my podcast, know that I lost my mom during my undergraduate years. So by the time I graduated, I was just through. It was like I just needed some type of breather. And so I went to my college advisor and ended up learning about a job at Spelman College as a lab assistant. So I did that job. And it wasn't until talking about mentors and spending time with women in STEM, as Leslie just said, At Spelman College, you know, it's a historically Black college and university for African American women. And it was the first time that I had ever seen Black women PhDs, like writing $1 million grants, running labs. And I'm just like, what kind of world is this? Like, I was really on a moment. Like, I've never seen this. So no one had ever told me that I could just do lab work, run a lab, and get a PhD. Honestly, I don't know and I knew we had all these PhDs at ASMS, but again, representation matters. I had never seen myself in them. I knew they had PhDs, but I didn't think about me getting a PhD until I got to Spelman. In every department, chemistry, physics, biology, math, like it was Black women with PhDs. And that's when I was like, oh, maybe I should. And I realized I really like the work. I really like being in the lab and trying to figure things out. Really like talking over the science and just mulling over things over and over, which is a bad thing in personal life, but in real life. But in scientific life, it's good to keep thinking about things over and over. And so that exposed me. And so that led me to graduate school. And even though I ended up getting a PhD in graduate school, there are still things that I'm learning. One of them is a PA, so physician assistant. I was like, why nobody told me about that? Because in 2 years, I could have been 6 figures. But here I am as a PhD, not in 6 figures. I'm like, where's the love, people? Tell a sister about these things. So I think there's still programs that we don't know about, even once we get into the graduate side. So in my story, it's representation mattered. I didn't even think about becoming a PhD until I got to Spelman. And then once I was in graduate school, I started learning about other opportunities. Quite late in my graduate career, but still there are also other opportunities to learn about. So I just want to point that out.
And you know, something else that that I was just thinking about as you were talking about that, AS didn't have any women in math or science.
That's right.
Realize that as I was going through the list.
Me too.
And so, you know, maybe it was sort of natural for us when we were like, well, I'm not really into the math or science at this point. You know, when it got hard and we were thinking about other issues, that we started looking at the liberal arts thinking, well, maybe I should go that way instead. Because I hope it's not like that now, but representation really does count. And especially if you're interested in ecology, for the longest time, anything that had to do with outdoors and science and labs were almost completely dominated by men. And women went to other less, rugged kind of sciences that don't require camping. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I just thought of that. Wow, well, maybe that's why when it got hard, I thought about, you know, anthropology.
I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, it was a woman who was the chair of the economics department when I took that economics class, who saw potential in me and recognized all the skills that ASMS had helped me hone in math and in programming, and said, hey, you know, please come by my office, let's talk. I see potential in you. And really, she's the one that helped me understand how I could succeed as a woman in economics. And seeing that there was a woman at that time, now we're talking a good, 20 plus years ago, one of the few chairs of economics, who was female, made such an impression on me. And it made me think, like Sabrina was saying, I can do this, right? Because I see a woman in front of me taking interest in me who has already done it. And it made all the difference.
I went to a women's college for my undergraduate degree, and one of my I went to Wesleyan, Sabrina. So I was a Maconite for 7 years. And one of my favorite things about my experience there was that women ruled the world. We held every leadership position. If something needed to be done, a woman was in charge of it, and we got stuff done. And, that's what I needed to see, because I had not seen that as much in academic and in, just regular life. So it's fun.
So I wanted to ask, piggybacking off of what Leslie said about the importance of having someone recognize potential in you, which often comes as a result of, someone seeing a little bit of themselves in you, which we women get oftentimes. I wanted to ask specifically, Hang, you and Sabrina had very different experiences as women when you were pregnant, which is something that we often go through that has a huge impact on our careers. And I know I've found in my career just a basic level of understanding is more frequently to be found in a woman colleague than a man colleague. And you two both mentioned earlier how you had such different experiences when you got pregnant, and it kind of drove you in two different directions. I wanted to find out if it was women that you were working with, or not a woman that you were working with, that had an impact on which direction you ended up going.
Well, my experience with my boss and my working environment was very nice. I have a very pleasant and my boss was very proactive with his department. And like I said, my STEM my career was very short. When I graduated, I went right to the hospital and worked. And but when now thinking about it, a lot of people that are in the management, we're all men. And I didn't realize that, but I do realize, thinking to everyone, and everybody was a man. And then there was one lady that did the schedule. But pretty much management, night shift manager, a lot of the guys were guys. And but I was fortunate that my boss, and I was blessed that he was a good boss and he was willing to look out for the department. And like I said, when I got pregnant, I had thought about my family. We had talked about my family worked a lot, and I didn't have a lot of help. So we had decided that I would stay home and watch my daughter when I would have her when I was pregnant. And so I had decided that after I have a baby, I would stay home and watch the kid. And I remember talking to my boss, and he said, "We're not going to talk about that right now. You just go home and take your maternity leave, and then you come back and you tell me that you decided to stay home after staying home on maternity leave. Because if I had told him that beforehand, he would have to terminate me, and I would not be able to, reap the benefits of maternity leave and things like that. So he was really looking out for me. So that was a nice and very blessed, boss that I had. So that was a very good experience for me.
Yeah, that sounds like there was a good boss.
Yes.
Sabrina, what about you? What was your experience?
Yes, so unfortunately, I didn't have Hanes boss because I would have loved it. So I was at a postdoc at the time, and when I went to the boss to let him know that I was expecting, the conversation went, "Well, if I had known you were going to choose motherhood, I don't know if I would have hired you."
Mm-hmm.
And sitting there, I couldn't believe he was saying this to me, and I was really like. So we had that both look at each other moment, like, "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" And he's looking at me like, I'm saying what you think I'm saying. And I was like, "Oh my God." And so that day I decided that I needed to leave because I knew then that he was going to make the pregnancy very stressful and that I was not going to be supported in this environment. And so I just, you can understand when people now are going to really try and get you out because they don't like where you're going. And so I made it the choice to call a previous boss who I knew supported me on all ends, who happened to be a woman. And she knew of a position in her department that they were looking for someone. And so, of course, she spoke highly enough of me that I ended up getting that position. So in a matter of a week of him saying that, I was gone. And I know he may still be wondering, like, how did that happen? And that's when you be well connected with the women that you know. And they most of the time will understand the position you're being put in, especially when it comes to something like a child, like supposed to be the most happiest moment in your life. And here someone is telling you, "Oh, well, I'm really not happy that you're doing this." And so I really had to think about, am I supposed to choose my career over my children? Like, is that really something. And so I really was like, oh my God, they really make us think about this and choose. And I really was upset at that. So after that, I was like, I made sure that I kind of asked questions in any interview that kind of let me know how they felt about family time,
Right.
and how they felt about you having a family, pretty much. So I think that's the different route that it led me. I stayed in STEM, as you see, but
Yeah.
I just learned how to navigate it better.
Right. You stayed in it because you persevered despite a huge could possibly have been career-ending obstacle that was tossed up. Wow, that was a wow moment for me.
I know, and I'm that person
Yeah.
that's like, who are you to tell me what I can't do?
Yeah.
Like, what?
It could have been career ending or it could have
Why?
been a lucrative EEOC moment, depending on how
Yes.
so there's
Cecily,
that.
she knows what she's
Well,
talking about.
I'll just also mention, for me, I had children pretty late in life. I had my kids when I was 39 and 40 and well into my career, but I was working for a company that didn't even offer maternity leave.
Oh
Yes,
wow.
so we were forced to use our sick time and our vacation to cover that span of time, those 12 weeks that we needed at home, after the baby. So I was fortunate enough that I did have enough time in order to do that. And I was working with the boss that was understanding and, allowed that time for me to be at home with baby. But unfortunately, in 2021, there's still companies out there that do not offer that time. And I'll say that right now, my company does offer it. My daughter is 5 now, and I think that following year or maybe the year after that, they started offering those 12 weeks of maternity leave. And so I was happy for the ladies that came after me and were able to get that time. But yeah, unfortunately, there's still companies out there that don't offer maternity leave.
So is that an experience that any of you other ladies have had where there's a benefit now that is available in either your career field or your specific place of employment that was not available when you started, but it is available now?
I can say that at one of the companies I worked with, when they moved to a new office complex, they actually had to put in lactation and privacy rooms in their office as part of regulations.
That's nice.
What's interesting is that as a teacher, I've always worked in a female-dominated field. All my principals have been women. It's been very female-dominated. But when I took my maternity leave, I could take the 12 weeks, but if I wanted to get paid, I had to use all my leave time, either my sick leave, my vacation leave. And when it came, I was a working nursing mother, and I had two choices. I could go into my closet, the classroom that had an outlet, and I could pump in my closet, or I could go into the copy room, which was a common space, and put a note on the door asking people to not come in. And thinking about where I work today, I work in an elementary school, and we have several nursing moms, and that it's there are no set places for that. You just have to find a little cubby space. It doesn't. I don't think workplaces anywhere, even in female-dominated ones, make having a baby and being a nursing mother easy. It's definitely a struggle if you want to do these things.
And I laughed, Stephanie, because I too had to go into a copy room and pump milk because I was working at McWayne Science Center in Birmingham, and at the time they just didn't have it, so you had to go to the copy room behind the little cubicle, the wall, and I always say, "Hey, I'm pumping." So the guys, you could have a look if you want, but I'm pumping.
Yeah, there were plenty of called out, "Hey, I'm in here." At the time, I worked at a convention center, and my classroom had a video camera. So, because it was surveillance, and so I couldn't even use my class. It was, it's just you don't think about these things unless you're a woman who needs to do them. And now that I've been in the position, I notice, see other women struggling to do their best, but I don't know that everybody does.
That's true. I was lucky, actually. I became a lawyer, so and I worked in a public defender's office. So we had our own offices. So the pumping thing was not an issue, but being in court and having to tell your judge, I need to go because, that was always awkward. But I'm thankful that our judges were very understanding for the most part. We had one or two judges in the circuit that were a little difficult to deal with, and surprisingly they were women and mothers themselves, and that was very disappointing that they were the ones giving the pregnant attorneys the hardest time, refusing a break for lunch, refusing bathroom breaks, things like that. No, you can't go pump. But thankfully as lawyers, the one thing we do is figure it out, right? So the point is, we just learned as a women attorneys, if there's a judge is going to be difficult, you just ask for forgiveness and not permission. Just get up and walk out. If you ask and you leave and they tell you no, then you're violating their order. If you just walk out and then you're gone for an hour and they say, where you been? I'm sorry. So, that's one thing that you learn, and it helps to have other women who've been in the courts in front of you to kind of give you that little piece of advice. And, Julie, I think you have some experiences with difficulties in the workplace, just men, colleagues saying awkward or inappropriate things.
Yeah. It was one of those where, as I was in my computer science field, are going to school for that, I was in the computer science lab where we were doing all of our programming assignments. And one of the male students came to ask me questions and how to do things. And he made a comment about how, unlike another female, he said that I'm a programmer. So it was one of those where was kind of like, oh, you're the odd or you're the special female that in this field. So it's just kind of one of those weird things that if you shine, you're unusual or get called out with a different moniker as well.
Did you have any of you found, for instance, in situations like that, it's sometimes you find yourself in a situation where there seems to only be room for one. And so, when you have a field where there may be, two women, it seems that the environment is sort of pitting you against each other to compete for the position. That can be the case whether you're a woman or whether you're another type of minority. Have any of you felt that experience where instead of sort of a camaraderie amongst women, you were kind of pushed to the other side and sort of forced to compete?
I certainly haven't experienced it in the extreme, but I have been in places where it sort of underlied the experience. And I think that is a very natural thing when there are only a couple of spaces for certain types of people, whether that be women, whether that be, people of color, whatever it is other than, white male, to be quite honest, when we know that there are these sort of limited numbers, that competition is going to kick in naturally. And unfortunately, what I think that it has done, and especially for women, because people like to talk about this a lot, right? That women, are catty and that they're at each other and they're not actually collaborative. And I believe that is completely false. But in an environment where, because there is such limited ability to rise as a woman and there are only a few slots available, any type of person might feel that competitiveness and human nature kick in. But women are, I believe, incredibly collaborative and supportive by nature. And sort of in this environment, don't really understand how to fight back against that type of moniker that we get of being, these catty, angry women. We really aren't. And I think that when we start to collaborate within environments, if we have the ability, or we start to collaborate outside of those environments to support one another through our own journeys, is really how we help one another rise and get rid of that completely false representation that we are actually all out, for each other's jobs, or trying to hold each other back or hold each other down. I think it's completely false. And the situation that we find ourselves in, the environment, is what causes that, and yet exacerbates this very false idea of the way that women work together.
So something that happened to me that is sort of the opposite of this is I worked with a lot of men, and when the admin assistant couldn't take notes for meetings and things like that, like these big important meetings, they always asked me, the woman. Mind you, I am an excellent typist, but they did not know that when they began asking me to do it. And so, I'm a team player, and I didn't want to make a fuss about it. So I just did it, and I did it for years. Because because you don't want to be that woman. You know what I'm saying? That woman.
Right.
And so,
That's
but
right.
I do think it was very funny because, there's 10 of them and one of me, and I'm the one taking notes.
Yes.
I think sometimes that I found that women try to make themselves smaller so that they make waves and they can kind of fit in. I know I have a daughter who's 10, and she has a very big personality. And one of the things I want to try really hard to do is to let her stay big. I want to all the room. And that's part of why I enjoy teaching 6th grade girls, because I feel like at that point, that's when 6th grade girls start learning to make themselves small. And I think it's really important to empower little girls to know their own power. And that's just one of the important things for me as a teacher.
So it's funny talking about making yourself small. Like I said before, I career switched a couple of times, but I ended up in a STEM career about 10 years ago. And it took me maybe 4 or 5 years into the career field to sort of crawl out of the little box that I honestly put myself into, specifically as it related to salary. Like moving back into, I'm an application analyst for an electronic health record system, and it was a huge leap in salary from what I had been making as a social worker. But eventually, and what I credit my sort of group of women friends with, we started talking about money, and I realized that my box was too small, and it was time to step out of the box. It was time for me to acknowledge, I have achieved the same things that these folks have achieved. We're working on the same level. We have the same title, all things held equal, except we weren't making the same amount of money. And so it was because of moving back into a STEM field, and also my core group of women colleagues, that I've been able to increase my level of pay to a rate that I feel is fair. It's something that is comparable with other people across the board in my career field. And I'm wondering, is that something that you all have been experiencing as you've been, some have more traditional career fields and some have less traditional, like you, Leslie, where you're kind of carving your own path there. But what has your experience been in STEM as it relates to your pay equity?
Yeah, I mean, I can say first, what I want to say is, I think as women, sometimes we are conditioned not to come across as too aggressive in those salary negotiations. We often, when we're asked what you're looking for, what are you looking for? We often feel obliged to answer, and which puts us at a poor position in terms of negotiation, right? And so there are many characteristics that some of us have been that are very positive in a lot of other areas, and yet in this area, especially around salary, really cause us to struggle and sometimes to get in our own way unintentionally. And same thing for me, Tamika, is that it took other women around me to say, hey, don't give the number first. Nothing's going to happen if you say something like, oh, I'm sure that you had a salary range in mind when you posted this position. I'm curious what that is so that I can best understand how you're valuing the person with this skill set. There's nothing wrong in saying that. Nothing bad is going to happen. But yet I thought it would, that I would lose the opportunity, that they would see me as aggressive. And so only in the past, probably 5-7 years of my career have I come to the point that I've become very comfortable. And I'll tell you what really made me comfortable. It's when I started building and hiring my own teams. And then I realized, wait a second. People are actually much more powerful than they think, especially women in these negotiations. But yet, because we don't talk about it openly and we don't talk about salary, we really don't understand it. And so I think in some ways, the first barrier that we need to get over in terms of earning more and having pay equity is the confidence to ask for what we're worth and what we deserve. And the way that you find that out oftentimes is by asking other women in your field what are they making, and then asking, and I found that this is true, other men that you do trust what they're making and the ones that will tell you, and you start to kind of gather this data around it. But I do think this is one of the fundamental issues that we face as women, not just in STEM, but in all fields.
Actually, I took your words and put it up there. You need to memorize that. Memorize that. And honestly, that's something that I tell students and young lawyers all the time is, when you're in these situations where a colleague, especially as women, we're going to get crazy remarks from colleagues all the time. When you're in those situations, you need to have some just quick verbal combat in your mental Rolodex to use. And this salary question is one that you need to commit to memory. You need to go ahead and just memorize that word for word until you get it down and have it so you're not caught off guard. Same thing when people would come into court and I'm the judge and they say, are you the interpreter? My first time it happened, I'm stunned. Then I said, you know what? I need to have something in my, in my Rolodex to come back. So I would just say, well, why would you say that? And then it's just this awkward silence, right? Because then it makes them check themselves on what assumptions they made about me. I had somebody, I'm coming back from court, and this man asked me if I was going to the child support office. So he caught me by surprise. He caught me slipping, but he didn't get, no one caught me again, because then I would say, no, why do I look like I'm going to the child support office? And so then you get them. So same thing with the salary. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Memorize it.
Yeah.
It's really important to talk about, because it's something like we've been conditioned our entire lives that salary conversation takes place, in HR, and it's a secret, and you can't talk about it with don't talk about it with anybody. And you're setting us up for failure to keep ourselves as low as possible. But I definitely, I agree that, first of all, having, like you said, Ruth, a comeback ready, or having, just memorizing what it is that I'm going to say when this question comes up. But also, to Leslie's point, not just talking to women, but also to men that you trust to find out, because even if you are on par with women in your career field, it is highly likely that you are not on par with the men who are working in the office right next door to you. And so that's something else that has been helpful to me in this career field, just having some, because, there are plenty of men around in the field, to have some trusted men friends that will have these conversations as well. And then you really get an idea of, where do I fit on this scale? But it's definitely something that we need to stop being afraid of talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
One
And
other
let me make sure that I don't give anybody poor advice around this. I'm not suggesting that you necessarily go ask the men in your current department or company or what have you.
Yeah, no.
But unless again, you're very close friends and colleagues, and
Right.
it's not a thing. But what myself and other women that I know have done is similar to what Tamika is saying. Reach out to men in your field. Right. Who are in other organizations or other companies, because they're much more likely to tell you. They have nothing really to lose by telling someone outside of their organization and sharing that information. But I absolutely want to make sure that no one thinks that I'm suggesting that they go and survey the men in their current organization, unless you are in a very forward-thinking, forward-looking organization. I hope that you are. Many people aren't. So I just wanted to be sure to underline that.
What I was wanting to point out is I had been COVID layoffed beginning of this year, so I had to go through this hiring process. And what I ended up doing was going through technical recruiters, and they were pretty much my arbitrators to ensure that I got the best deal, so to speak, for my values and skill sets, because that would also empower them. So that's another way that we as women can proceed in technical fields, is to get a third party, so to speak, to be our advocates.
And I'll add too, just know what the pay range is for your grade level. Because with my company, there's a huge, very wide range of what you can earn at that particular pay level, and they overlap tremendously. So just know what your pay grade, what the range is, and negotiate that. Because with my company, they tend to just do what they call it, the annual cost of living raises. And so and typically that's all you'll get. But if you know what that pay range is, you can kind of be an advocate for yourself a little bit more and try to get on the top end of that scale, or at least ask the question, what can I do to get on the top end of the scale?
Yeah, and it really matters. You might think that, if I take $5,000 a year less than what I wish I would have received or whatever, that's not such a big deal. But speaking of math, if you do the math and you compound that over your career, it actually ends up to be quite significant in terms of lifetime earnings for women. And if you think about what you could do, if you took, for instance, $5,000 a year and invested that in a Roth IRA and continued to do that every year for 20 plus years, it's highly likely that you would have enough money to actually say, hey, I'm fearful of nothing anymore. And so just think about that small amount, or what you think is a small amount that you're giving up. In a lot of ways, you're giving up the ability over time to really have your own complete freedom.
So one thing,
Sabrina I'm sorry, go ahead, Holly.
One thing that I also want to add is that, as women, we've been talking about working and women and all of the issues associated with that. Sometimes it becomes really hard to actually work full time, and women take a penalty for that. I know that when my kids were born, I went 30 hours a week so that I could take on the additional responsibility. My husband made a lot more money than I did at the time. And so that was just sort of the natural thing. And when we moved to Atlanta, the cost of putting our kids in childcare was just not worth the hassle of me working and trying to get all of that together. because my husband's job was very inflexible at that point. Before, I had a really good boss and his job was very flexible and we could make that all work. At some point, and this is not the forum for that, but just something to think about, you know, we talk about women in STEM, we talk about women in the workplace. Also, we have to talk about family dynamics and how we have to have better work situations for people who need to be the primary parent. And it's usually the woman. It's not always, but it usually is. And I would love to have, you know, something part-time, but they don't consider, there's just not a lot of that right now going around. It is, they want to work you right up until they have to start paying you benefits, which is really more full-time without anything for you. And as we're talking about structures that need to be made to allow women to stay at work, we also need to think about all of the human cost that's lost, all of the brain power when one of the parents, man or woman, because I've known both sides that had to do it, have to either go down to part-time or just simply take some time off in order to make sure that their house doesn't collapse. Because you can't be everything to everyone all the time. And at some place, you know, I don't know. It's just something to think about as we move forward, thinking about how we structure work, when we structure work for both women in STEM and women outside of STEM.
Yeah, in my 20s, I read an article, and I can't remember what the lady had done, but she was I think she was a fashion editor. And she said that so many women want to have a life that's like a free cake, that has everything stuffed in. And so you have to do everything all at once. You try to make it all happen. And she said instead, she encourages women that she knows to start building layer cakes. You know, you get to do something and then put a little frosting on it. And then you get to do something else and you put a little frosting on it. And I kind of like that idea that I can always keep growing and I don't have to be everything all at once. Because I think as a woman, that's something that I struggled with when I started having children, because so much of how I felt, you know, good was working. And that was a struggle point for me when I started down the parenthood road with working at the same time.
Yeah, similar to what Hank was talking about earlier about just making the decision for her family, that her career in STEM was short, just because you weigh all the things that you have to weigh, and oftentimes, you know, choices having to do with family just outweigh whatever else you have going on with work, because oftentimes it is inflexible. I know when I started working after my daughter was born, I worked in acute care hospital systems, and I know when I first moved to Atlanta, I was working in a hospital, and the guilt that I felt that my daughter was eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner sometimes in the hospital daycare because I was working, you know, 12 or 14 hours was overwhelming. And it was such an inflexible environment. And oftentimes you just feel like, you know, you kind of are stuck between a rock and a hard place, and you're having to make things work for your family. When the workplaces act like they don't know that people have children, or they, you know, your supervisors and whomever, HR, you know, that they act like they don't know that children get sick, or that, you know, the parents get sick. That people need to take time off for whatever reason, that, you know, I have a child, I have to take them to the doctor. That doesn't mean that I won't ever come back to work again, but I don't need to build, you know, you don't need to count down the seconds of how many seconds I'm off the floor, you know, and have, you know, adding stress to me as an employee and as a parent, just because of having to juggle so many things. So I completely agree. Systems around just a holistic life, with work and with family, the balance is necessary. And I know we as we're older now and been in the career fields for a longer period of time can have more of an impact on ushering in some of those changes, or at least speaking up for them in our workplaces, just to make sure, like, you need a voice at the table who can say, hey, it's okay if this person works from home today. Like that's, in COVID times, we're doing that a lot more now, but previously it wasn't as common. And it was as though the building was going to fall down if you let somebody work from home. And it's like, actually, no, you'd have a more productive employee because they don't have to stress about the commute or whatever the case may be. So Holly, I completely agree with you.
And I could not agree more with what you're saying in terms of women as they do start to get a small foothold. It's incumbent upon us to speak up for everyone who doesn't yet have a voice, and to either, if some of us can, build companies that start creating these types of environment, and these companies thrive so that everyone understands not just that it should be tolerated, but in fact that it should be celebrated because of what women have to offer to companies and the growth and all of the value. And I think as more women have the ability to do that, to take high level positions in companies or start their own companies, and with this understanding of what women bring to the table, all women at any level and of any background, and really promote one another and support one another, I think it's the only way that we're going to see that change. Because change, everything that we see now is because of all of the leaders that are in place now. And in order to see something different, you're going to need different and more diverse leaders. Women and men, but men of other backgrounds, men of other experiences. And I hope that women of our generation and of the generations who come after us really think about how to forge that path for other women, so that 30 years from now, when I hope we all get back together again, what we are talking about is the progress that's been made by women in our cohort and women coming up after us to make sure that these things are put in place.
I completely
And I'll just add.
Go ahead, April.
I'm sorry. I'll just add that, with working from a male-dominated field, I always reported to men. And so as far as the flexibility of the work-life balance and trying to balance a career and being a mom, we're really at the mercy of the person that you're working for. And more often than not, those men had wives who didn't have careers. Yeah. So you either got the man that understood because his wife handled all those things and he was super appreciative that he didn't have to worry about any of it. He understood the work, that his wife had to put in, or you got the guy that didn't understand any of it and didn't know what it took to be a mom and have a career. So you were pretty much at the mercy of who you work for. And luckily, since becoming a mom, I've been lucky to be in situations where I pretty much work independently and could pretty much make my own schedule and do things that as I saw fit, or work for someone who really understood what their wives had on their plates and so forth.
April, to your point, I was just going to say, I'm sorry, Ruth. I was just going to say, I think that's a great point about being able to set your own schedule. And it's that's kind of divided people into groups now, like during this COVID time, like those of us who have jobs where we can set our own schedules and we don't have to leave the house for work if we don't want to. It has, set the country up in such a way that those people, oftentimes women who have jobs that require them to leave the home, that are often lower paid jobs, where they don't have as many benefits, they don't have as many options. COVID has really sort of exacerbated that, breaking things into these levels now. And Sabrina had brought up a stat earlier that women in STEM related fields on average make 105% the salary of women in non-STEM related fields. Is that right, Sabrina?
Yeah, I just put it up again.
Yeah, and so I have found, I don't know, this is something that I have been learning, like I said, especially with my eyes being opened to, salary negotiations and all these things over recent years, but especially now over the last year in COVID times, I have been encouraging young women and girls that I know who sort of are not 100% sure of the path they want to take, but they have the aptitude and the ability to go into a STEM field. I have been encouraging as much as I can for them to look at that, because it has such a huge impact. Like Leslie said, just even, $5,000 more per year can have such a huge impact on your life and the life of your family and your level of independence and ability to, survive times like this. I think about the Stephanie teachers, where you just kind of, it almost doesn't even matter if you have to go back into the classroom or you're teaching remotely. If you have your own children, you're a woman at home, you're more likely to be taking care of everything else in the household, the running of the household, plus homeschooling your own children and also trying to teach the children in your classroom. How's that been going for you?
Well, for the most part, I've been back in the classroom. My district went back pretty much as regular, and all wear masks. But we have had periods. I've been quarantined a couple of times because students have tested positive, and our district has shut down maybe 3 times here. And we're working from home. At my house, I'm kind of the CEO of my house, and so I'm doing Google Meet with my students, and I'm saying, okay, it's lunchtime, so now I'm making lunch for all the little people at my house, even the 17-year-old ones who are capable of their own, probably. And then I'm jumping back in a Google Meet, and it's hard. And teaching virtually is a hard thing to do, and especially if you're juggling a house full of people.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been, and it's been really super stressful. Just being in an environment surrounded by people all day, when you're supposed to be careful. So it's been different for sure. But as a teacher, I really encourage people to go into some STEM fields. That's part of why I push that so hard, is because, I encourage my students to think bigger, and I love my job, but I want them to, think more. Like, what else could you do?
And I just want to say, just coming from also the teaching profession, but at the college level, we, of course, started back as well. I don't think we ever stopped, but because we have, of course, online courses, a lot of the things went online. And as a science coordinator, I had already begun to populate about 85% of our classes online. For whatever reason, since I got here, that had been the work that I had been doing. And so when we talk about how did the pandemic shape what I do as a STEM person, I will say this: being in STEM has allowed me to be in a position to be where I can go in or not, to be able to do things like Stephanie is saying, do online learning, but I don't necessarily have to go into the classroom. Now, because I do labs, and I think labs are really important, I do go in. And of course, I ended up cutting classes in half and rotating students. So I do a whole lot more than most teachers, and I do know that. But I think for me, it definitely gave me a chance too, though, to think outside the box of some of the things that I could really do with students online. So now my students actually get sent home kits to actually do their dissections, because, hey, we still got to do this anatomy. You still got to learn this technique. So I'm going to send it to your house. You're going to clear off your table, and we're going to get together and do it. And I think it has inspired some of the innovation in teaching, because to me, we kind of sometimes get behind and we get comfortable. And I have to tell the students we're in a new era and a new normal, and everybody's got to get with the program. And I think it's definitely for the best. So in a way, I think the pandemic has definitely helped me reach out my tentacles even more in teaching.
You know, one thing that I think is going to really change in the future is I think that flexibility is a new perk for a job, kind of like health insurance is. That is one thing that I think having to go through all of this COVID stuff, and also the thing that millennials and the generation after them are really bringing is, why do you care if I'm sitting at a desk as long as the work gets done? You know, why do you care if I do it at 8 o'clock or if I do it at 2 a.m? And I think that that's really going to change the way that women are able to engage in the workplace in general by allowing that kind of flexibility, because we do carry more of the mental load of the household in most cases, not always, but in most cases. You know, I husband, and he's a wonderful father, but I don't think he knows when my kids need to go to the dentist, you know, or when they're due for their physicals, that kind of thing. And I am sure that he does not know how to log on to their school account to check their grades. So I'm just saying, women carry a tremendous amount of the is going to be a new commodity in the workplace, not just salary.
So, you know, piggybacking on that point, Holly, I know we've all been on here for a while. We could talk about, we've got tons and tons of stories to tell, I'm sure. But each of you ladies, if you had to identify an emerging field, given what you've experienced in STEM and what you know to be, even in your individual professional market, what's one area you would encourage young women to pursue in the areas of science, technology, engineering, economics, mathematics? And also, if you're aware of any groups where young ladies can go and get maybe a virtual mentor, give us that information as well so we can share with the audience.
I have an easy one right off the bat, and it's data science. It is a field where over the past decade, we've learned how to capture so much data about individuals, the world, everything. And now it is time for us to process and understand what that information means and how we can apply it in a rational and qualitative way.
So what would a person have to do when you say data science? So, you know, what are they looking to major in college, or what are internships, or how do they get started in data science?
Leslie is probably the pioneer of data science for us.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer both of your questions, Ruth. So one, so I would, and of course I'm biased, and I'm happy to say that I'm biased, but yes, I think that data in and of itself is a tremendous field for women to get into, because there's a pipeline of data. You don't have to learn how to do AI right off the bat. You don't need to do some of the complexities. There is so much opportunity in all, spanning from data entry to what's known as business intelligence, which actually is using data to tell stories with through graphing things, but not that aren't incredibly complicated. And what I would encourage women who have any interest in data is to understand that there are these stepping stones and building blocks, and you really can do it. So many women have an idea that somehow they're not good with numbers, they're not good with math. Don't believe it. You are, even if you think you aren't, I promise you are. What you need is something that gets you excited enough to lean into the potential that you have around data and numbers and math. But I couldn't agree with Julie more. It's so wide open, and you can apply it to any problem. You know, that's, for me, I've spent the past few decades of my career pointing my data skills, my technology skills at different problems that really fascinated me at different times. And that's what I love about a lot of the STEM fields, is that it's about accumulating a skill set and then having the flexibility to point it at problems. The second thing I'm going to say, and I hesitated to do it, but I'm not, since you asked the question directly, the tech startup that I founded is all about allowing women to find mentors. It is actually called Menther, MENTHER. If you go to menther.com, you can put your email address and we'll let you know when it launches. But this is now, as I move into the sort of third decade of my career, the thing that I care the most about is gender inequality and making sure that women across the generations have the ability to reach out to other women, develop some of those circles and support that we've been talking about today, because honestly, I really think that it makes all the difference. And as Mentor does make its way into the world, honestly, I would love if the women on this call, we could co-create it. The women who are listening, we can co-create it, because I've been blessed to accumulate these skill sets, and I want everyone to think of my hands as this vessel for women collectively to build this community that we all so badly need.
Awesome. Hey, what would you suggest? What kind of emerging field or area would you encourage young budding scientists to go into?
I've always liked STEM, and even my daughters now, I have two completely opposite girls. One that's very scientific, and one that's very creative. And I always say that STEM, mathematics, even now, even when I cater, it's always been, even the School of Math and Science. STEM, I feel like, is part of life, part of what we do, and it helps to problem solve. And when I'm catering, there's math, there's science, there's technique. And I use, it's not just science and it's not technology only, it's also what I'm using in catering. When you follow a recipe, now everything's YouTube, videos. You have to multiply for the amount of guests that you have. So I feel like any STEM field is very good right now, especially like with the pandemic. For kids nowadays, even to log on, I tell my daughter, she's all pre-med, all biology. I said, look, in order to do all that, you still want to have to understand the technology of it. Everything is online now. You see how classes are. You still have to learn technology, computer, coding. That's just part of today's society. You have to learn that and catch up on that. Yes.
Right. And actually, one thing I dabbled in as a hobby before we had kids was, doing bakery stuff and selling treats. And you know where I got stuck? Pricing,
Yeah.
trying to make sure that my costs were covered in my price. And I got overwhelmed by trying to do the math and said, screw it, I'll just make it and give it away. But I can't sell it because I don't know if I'm going to do the math right. So you're right. Math is everywhere. It follows me. I went to law school because I got depressed that I wasn't as good at math as I thought I was. And then in my career, I had to do a lot of math. Guess what kind of cases we had? Mortgage fraud. Guess what that is? Accounting. I cried. That was one of the first times I cried in a case, is because I had to do math, and a lot of it, thousands and thousands of pages of documents that all dealt with math. So you cannot escape it. I tried. Holly, your advice.
Holly, you're on mute.
Sorry, I got it. I was just typing mine up in the little chat box, but I guess this will save me time. I think that with climate change and all of the emerging environmental problems, we're going to need a lot of people that not only are doing the data science, but also doing, which I think is very important in terms of finding trends, but we're going to need people that are able to do modeling, like water resource modeling for areas across the large swaths of the country that are undergoing unprecedented droughts. We're going to have to find new ways to engineer smart grids for our electricity and other utilities. We have aging infrastructure. I mean, Philadelphia just took out wooden pipes that bound like 100 years ago or something like that, about 20 years ago. Wooden pipes for yes, crazy. And Atlanta loses an enormous amount of its water to leaky infrastructure. So for people who are looking to do some sort of altruistic science that will still make them some money, I highly recommend looking into being able to help with these emerging problems, as we have to find ways to adapt the changing environment.
Yeah, and I want to say, speaking of emergent, uh, for me as a scientist, I think, and I think about all the times that I took virology classes and was just like, oh, viruses are so boring. As I sit now in the middle of a pandemic, I'm like, viruses are very interesting. I need to know as much as I can about it. Like, what is this doing and why? And so, emergent infectious disease is one that I think definitely we should look into going to. Public health is another. I think, because all of us had never seen a pandemic. And again, we hadn't had one really in the US since the Spanish flu. And so now that we get to this, it's like, oh, it's going to come back, not saying COVID, but in the lifetime of the next generation of STEM-inists, they will see probably another pandemic. And so we need to have young women. And I don't know if you all have heard her name, but Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett is the leading female scientist for Moderna. And she was working on the vaccine before COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 even hit, because she had been working on MERS before this. And so because I follow her on IG, I already knew of her work. And so when I realized, when we started panicking in July, they were already going into clinical trials, because she had been working on this, because she had already seen some similarities between SARS-CoV and MERS that she was working on. So all I say that to say is that there's an African-American female that has led the trove in this vaccination race. And she is the reason, she is a part of the reason that we have the Moderna vaccine and why it's so effective. And so if I could just steer any young female that is interested in science on a direction or path, definitely emergent infectious diseases. And please never again in your life think that a virus is boring. No, ma'am, not at all.
Yeah. And I'm actually just going to put a plug in for one more thing as I was thinking about it, because I do realize that many women who are listening now or may see this later may simply say, but you know what, really, the hard math is just not for me. It's not something that I want to do. You're talking about data, et cetera. And we haven't really talked a whole lot about sort of technology or software development, which is a lot of the things that I'm doing these days. And I just also want to mention to women that there are positions out there that really support the delivery of excellent software and technology that perhaps might appeal to you and you haven't been introduced to, you haven't heard of, but there are a lot of things around creativity and design. And this is what I think Julie can speak about, much better than I can. But as Sabrina was saying, we're moving so even more into this online community, into a mobile handheld community. The need for good UI, UX, which is also known as, user interface and user experience, or really amazing websites that deliver content, but just the graphic design behind that, the thoughtful user experience, and how to tell people stories, and how to bring them into technology, and how to use design and user experience to help convey certain things, or to support businesses or organizations that you care about, or even nonprofits, et cetera, wherever your interests lie. There are actually a lot of really amazing careers that surround data and technology, and in fact are the thing that links them to humans and their desire to want to use these data and technology tools that are so powerful and incredibly important. And so I just wanted to kind of give a nod there to the careers that are very much in tech, but are not exactly the mathematical fields that all of us are going on and on about, but they're there and they're real and they pay very well, and they can be incredibly satisfying if you are able to support data and tech in a way that helps users interact with it and really extract all the value that is meant for them. So I just wanted to make a plug for some of those fields as well.
To give an example, I was on a team developing a software product. It was a team of 7 people. 3 of the people on that team are not classic STEM people, but they are there to help support this technological product. And one other aspect that Leslie triggered in my mind with the UI UX is accessibility issues. We're starting to becoming more global, and we need more people that can help with accessibility and also communication.
Well,
And so I just want to pay you, just because we're talking, and Leslie has stoked this in all of us. Julie just said, communication, and that's also a big thing for someone interested in science. It's science communication. As you know, as we've gone through this pandemic, being able to have someone be able to break down the science so that the layman can understand it, and then being able to present it in a way. I always tell people I'm really into infographics because I love pictures. And so just pictures with words, I don't know why it makes me read it. I'm like, ooh, they put pictures and words together. What is this? And so I will jump to it. But that is a great way to actually convey difficult scientific problems to the general public. And so being a part of the scientific community and communication is definitely a way. Just in me, and I know you all, this is probably a shameless plug, in hosting the STEM Lab podcast, it was a way for me, knowing I like talking to people and wanting people to know about different women in different aspects of STEM and having them be a part and come on and tell their story is also just another form of science communication. It's me deciding that I wanted to convey science in another form that would interest others. Again, for me, it's like an informal mentoring. I want young ladies or young women in college to hear those stories, and definitely, like they heard ours tonight, be able to say, hey, that's something that I would be interested in. I would love to talk to that person a bit more, or I would love to learn a bit more about that. And so, again, in science, communication in very creative ways is another way to go.
A couple of things for ladies for you to think about when you're going into the career world. Forming your own business, you can be a business entity of one, and you make yourself a business entity of one. You develop software, you understand how to write software. There are lots of contracts that, especially government contracts, that are set aside for minority and women-owned businesses. The majority of those women-owned businesses contracts are not filled every year. So you could be doing federal government contracts, state, local government contracts, and as the leadership in these different governmental levels changes to a more diverse leadership, you're going to see more and more entities requiring more contracts and more business being done with women-owned businesses. So you should think about that. You can be a business entity of one and contract with some of these big companies and local governments.
And to hear more about that, you could actually listen to, I think it's episode 8 of the STEM Lab podcast, Letitia McMullen, mechanical engineer. She also did that. She became a single entity to get a contract in order to be able to work with a company that she was once working for. So, hey, just another shameless plug. But yes, April, I think you had something to say.
Yeah, I was going to say project management, Ruth, in just kind of touching on what several of you have said, especially Leslie, for those of us who may have the math and science, the heavy math and the heavy science background is not a path that we took, but you have a sort of a baseline understanding and an ability to, like Sabrina said, to communicate to end users. So that's sort of how I ended up back in tech. That's my, the acronym STEM. My letter is T. So I do tech. I do not do coding. I'm not, a developer. I work with software. And it is something that can, you are able to make yourself an entity of one. You are able to go after contracts. You are able to have a really lucrative career, not doing very technical, detailed math and science work, but more bridging the gap between those people who are, we used to tease them, their office was always in the basement. They were always in the basement. Nobody ever saw them. Those were like the real tech people that were down there coding. And then those of us who were up, moving through the floors, interacting with people who, a nurse who's been working for 40 years as a nurse, and they've been charting on paper her entire nursing career, and now their hospital system has moved into electronic health records, and they need not only for the health record to be developed so that the nurse can use it, but it also needs to be developed so the patient can understand their own health information. And all of the data that has been documented on a patient needs to be parsed out in different ways so that whoever needs that particular information can do what they need to do with it. And that is and then like I was saying before, with project management, not only is that STEM career fields that you can be a project manager for, it's sort of a way that you can move back and forth across several different things. Because you can be a project manager on a construction site. Like project management is something that women often do, managing, your entire lives and your children's lives and your, spouse's lives and budgets and all of these different things that really are inherent to the project management career field. It's sort of things that you do already, but you can kind of translate skills that you already have into a way to make a good amount of money for yourself and for your family, and also stay current in the way that the world is going now with the STEM career field. So it's like everything that all of you have said kind of fits together in how I ended up moving back into the STEM field.
Hey, I just want to mention real quick. Most of the careers that we talked about are things that require a bachelor's degree or an advanced degree. But I work in the nuclear industry as a maintenance manager, and in our maintenance department, we have our mechanics and our electricians and our INC technicians that support and run the plant. They fix and build the plant. So, and those are careers in STEM that do not require 4-year degrees. So you can go to, and actually some of them don't have degrees at all. They come into the industry as an entry-level position, and over the years through the union, they can advance and get on-the-site training to become an electrician or mechanic, or I think our INC techs have to have at least associate's degree. But they are very lucrative careers that they're on par with what some of our engineers make. So for those that don't feel like they want to do a 4-year degree, or they don't feel like they're, want to go to college for that amount of time, or grad school, there are other STEM careers that don't require a bachelor's that are very lucrative careers.
That's an excellent point. Do they get certifications through the union? Do they get sent to advanced training or something?
They get sent to advanced training. It's like as positions become available, based on their seniority and the union rules, they can get selected, to go to training and actually become an electrician or a mechanic or whatnot. So yeah.
And so, I think Stephanie and Sabrina and Tamika all kind of touched on something similar. And this is, again, just another idea. Although, I did it as an attorney, you may have a position and you can carve out one for yourself. That what I did was kind of translate forensic data for other attorneys. So when I quit my job and I went into private practice, the hustle and bustle of driving from county to county, courthouse to courthouse really started to wear me down. So one of the things I did was I said, you know what? I'm pretty good at understanding all this DNA and blood spatter stuff. Why don't I offer my services out to other attorneys? And it became a really hot item because what attorneys are doing, a lot of attorneys are attorneys because they're scared of math and science. And they hire scientists to come in and tell them that their case is terrible. And you just paid $10,000 for someone else to tell you your case is terrible. You don't need to do that. You can pay me half of that, wink, wink, and I'll tell you your case is terrible. And I'm going to tell you how to write your questions so that your case doesn't sound so terrible because I've actually litigated terrible cases. So it became a better option for them. And I actually literally would take their data, their scientific reports, the GBI crime lab reports, autopsy reports, and I would write their cross-examination questions for them. And I got paid to do that. I didn't have to go to court. I didn't have to interview witnesses. Sometimes I would in a complicated case. I would participate in the witness interviews. And then I would take all that information and I would write their questions and send it to them in a very unsophisticated Word doc. So that's something you can do. And if you have a good understanding of science and you can break it down, because the art of trying a case is going to be explaining complicated science to the ordinary person. And so if you have that ability, you don't have to be a lawyer. You just have to have that ability to explain complicated science in an easy way. There's money to be made just writing questions for somebody.
That's a great point, Ruth. I ended up in my career field as well. Normally people would need to have some sort of a tech background. My bachelor's degree is in communications and my master's is in social work. So I did not have the educational background, but I had the aptitude. And that's what was tested, when the opportunity presented itself for me to kind of move over from social work into an application analyst position. They didn't really care that I didn't have the right degree. They cared, did I have the aptitude to learn what I needed to learn for this job? And, that was the best career move I've ever made in my life.
Ladies, it's been a wonderful evening. We thank everyone for, joining us and listening to all of our war stories and taking some advice. We want to leave you with, I guess we'll go around and have everyone just leave our audience with a final thought on whatever issue that struck a chord with you tonight. And we'll end with our hostess with the mostest, Sabrina. So Julie, you want to start us off?
Sure thing. It was really fun talking with all my wonderful former classmates this evening. And finding your path in STEM is can be messy, but once you find your passion, it is so rewarding.
April? Okay, for April.
I'm sorry, just trying to come off mute. Yeah, I enjoyed myself as well tonight. And yeah, I just want to remind everybody, that all of us are, we started in STEM, just very different career paths. So there are just a lot of options out there. And also, like Tamika, it's because you start in that direction doesn't mean you have to stay there. So you can always jump into different fields. Even with me, with being with the same company for so long, I've done various things. So STEM is a good way to go. And like Tamika said, it's more about aptitude, where you can show that you can learn and do different things. And so the opportunities are endless.
Thank you, Holly.
Oh, I would just say that when you take the math and science classes and you find that they're very, very hard, what I tell the kids in my life all the time is just because it's awkward doesn't mean that you're not meant to be there. There's always an adjustment period whenever you're setting a new skill set. And it just means that for a little while, you're going to have to put more effort into it than you would something that comes super easy. But it doesn't mean you're not meant to be there. It just means that it's going to require a little bit more focus for a while. And I guess that would be my advice.
Thank you, Holly. Leslie?
Yeah, I would say don't try and be perfect. Don't try and pick the perfect field and the perfect major for those of you going into college. I would say get comfortable experimenting and finding your way. If you get, quote unquote, you get off the path like so many of us have, but as you see, we actually haven't. We've all ended up in really wonderful places, but there were detours along the way. And so to all the women out there, whether you're doing STEM or any other fields, I would say progress over perfection. Please remember that. That's all that matters for us women, because so many parts of our lives are going to require us to take detours, and we'll find ourselves in different places. So please don't judge yourself from around perfection, just forward progress. The other thing, of course, I'm going to say is reach out to other women. You would be surprised at how many are willing to help you and guide you and give you the benefit of their experience if you just ask. Someone in the chat asked about mentorship availability, and I will say I'm trying my best to make mentor available to everyone as soon as possible. But for that woman who asked that question, if she's looking for advice now, reach out to me on LinkedIn and I will talk to you personally if you want to know more about the fields that I have background in. So I'll leave you with that.
Wonderful. Stephanie?
Yeah, when I think back to the Alabama School of Math and Science, that's probably one of the scariest things I've ever done in my life. I went to a school that didn't exist. I lived near Mobile. I knew that was an empty building. And so I guess my advice is that when you get to a place in life and you have to decide whether to do the safe thing or the scary thing, pick the scary thing. It's going to be okay. Holly was talking about hard things. I have in my classroom, we do hard things until they're easy. Everything's hard when you start. And so you got to keep pushing forward and keep doing the hard things and the scary things.
Beautiful. Hey?
Well, as we end, we all also remind everybody this is March is Women's History Month, and I also want to say, as we're here all connected on this podcast, and I love this little get together we got to do, and I just want to say also, if any of us ever have a chance to help another woman out there, just uplift anyone and just celebrate each other. And like Leslie say, if anybody needs help or a friend, I have a great group of friends, girlfriends that helps support each other and uplift each other. And whether you're in STEM or in life or anything, it's always good to have a good group of friends, women to help each other, support each other.
Very true. Oh. What were you saying, Ruth?
I thought April had her hand up.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, piggybacking on what many have said, I say to my daughter all the time, we were built to do hard things. Like, we were built to do hard things. The hard thing is not going to kill you. The uncomfortable thing is not going to kill you. So absolutely do not stop pushing forward because the thing is uncomfortable or because it is difficult, because you are well able to do it. You have what you need in order to accomplish the things that you want to do. And to that point, go with your gut. I'm sure all of us have encountered discouragement along the way where there was something that we, thought to do or wanted to do that might have seemed crazy at the time. It might have seemed like something that we could not accomplish at the time. people may have questioned, your decision making because of the things that you were doing. But like Leslie said, even though it seems like we may have all kind of veered off of a particular path, we actually haven't. We are where we are supposed to be. Our gifts have made room for us. And so I think that's what I would say. Go with your gut and do not avoid the hard thing.
And I just wanted to make another point about the support system that Hang touched on. Ruth, a couple months ago, you posted a story on Facebook about starting a new job and having a woman on your job come to you and say, hey, if you ever need anything, call me and talk to me. And she's like, people say there's no such thing as a stupid question, but there is. So if you need to know something, come to me first. And I was so touched by that story because I was like, wow, what if all women walked into a support system and a network like that? And I don't have that. And that's just not the culture that's at my job currently. And so what I decided from that point is, even though I didn't have that person to be that for me, I want to be that person for someone. So I want to encourage everybody to extend that olive branch to that new person that's coming in the door. All of us are pretty much advanced in our careers right now. So just be that person for someone. And also along the lines of what Leslie is doing with her mentorship program, it's very important to be that support system in this male-dominated field, and just knowing that you have someone there that has your back.
Excellent point, April. And I think it not just being the support system for that younger woman at your job, being that support system when they're not there. So one of the things that I'm in senior leadership now, and when I hear a question, oh well, do you think she can do that? First thing I say is, she's a woman, why couldn't she? I throw it back, or I'll say something like, she's carried babies. Yes, she can do that. Just to kind of put those misogynistic comments back in their place and say, why would you question that? And even when people say things to me and I appreciate it, oh, I'll do that. That's too heavy for you. I turn around and say, I can't twins. It doesn't, this is nothing. Or, are you, so, constantly, just even if you hear people saying things about younger female employees, put them back in their place, check them, call them out, say stuff, just even if it's just to make them feel uncomfortable, because that stops the culture. That puts the culture in place when they know that you're listening and that you will respond. So on that note, we're going to take it back to the kinder, gentler host, which is Sabrina. Help us out, ma'am. You're muted.
Can't hear.
Let's see, it's not unmuting. We can't hear you. Try muting and unmuting, yeah.
Still can't hear.
Well, I'm going to say on Sabrina's behalf, can you all hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
She has been nerve-sighted about this event all leading up to it, but it's something that is extremely close to her heart, is right in her back pocket. This is her lane, and she absolutely, I know, appreciates everyone having her back and joining her in this way she wanted to celebrate Women's History Month by gathering together some women pioneers from the Alabama School of Math and Science class of 1993. And so, Sabrina, we've lost your volume, but I know you want to thank everybody for their participation. Thank all the viewers for hanging in there with us, and hopefully we have provided some things to think about, some useful information. We want, your contacts to know that if there's anything that we can do to be of service or be of assistance or provide any more information about our particular career fields, we're willing to do that. Sabrina, type in the chat if there's something else that you want me to say on your behalf other than thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for this
Thank you,
opportunity.
everyone.
So wonderful to see all of you again.
Yes.
Yes.
I hope we don't wait this long.
We
Yeah.
will. We need to send you all of our email addresses so you can sign us up on your
Yes.
Yes.
Go to the website. Go to the website, put your address in. But also, you guys, let's get together and figure out how to do a reunion right in 2 years, right?
Yes.
Do it.
Yeah, that's right. All right.
Bye.